Now, how do you think my aunt recognized the body? He was wearing that red flannel shirt. The red flannel shirt, we were so embarrassed to send him. So on December 11, I was baptized. On December 12, my father was a very brave man. He was running around with false papers, and he saw some children being taken by the Nazis. That was enough for him. He ran to the convent and asked them to let me out. He said, I'll bring her back, but her mother is very worried. My mother didn't even know about it, so he took me home. Okay. So I arrived to this crowded apartment, and December 12th, the day before I was baptized. I wish he came one day earlier. And we were spending there the Christmas. But we knew that the houses are emptied by the Nazis every day at different house. It was getting closer and closer and closer, and they are going to take us to the Danube and Chantal. We didn't even know what exactly they're doing, but we knew that these people don't come back. You know, we were not 100% sure. We were not that close to the place where they were shooting them into the Danube. So we didn't know what happens, but we knew that it was not good if they came for you. That people were also still taken to concentration camps. Whenever there was, they were put into the railroad station. If there was a train available, they were shipped to a concentration camp. So one day, I think it's after the second day of Christmas in Hungary, it's 2 days, with holiday, they came for us. I think in December 27. The usual escort, a Hungarian Nazi and a Hungarian gendarme, Hungarian corporal, military corporal, and they asked for us in the house. And before this, I told you sometimes I do forget at the right place. Before I came back, I was still in the convent. One night they called my father to the gate that he has a visitor. What visitor? What visitor? The Jews were behind gates, you know, they couldn't go to the street anyhow. This was after 5 o'clock, curfew hour. They couldn't go out, and we had no Christian friends after 38, no Christians talk to us anymore. So who would come to visit us? My father goes down to the gate, and they say, you have a visitor. They open the gate, and all he sees is a tower of paper boxes, gray paper boxes. It looked like pizza boxes, okay? And he looks behind, a voice says behind the box, take this, I bring more. I come back and bring you more. My father looks behind the boxes, and who does he see? What do you think? Who does he see behind the boxes? Yes. Who? Who? Excuse me. You said no, that's a good guess. No, it could be, yeah, it is a nice guess, but no, not Mr. Thor. It's a little taxman, that miserable little bureaucrat who tortured his life for years. The little taxman brought cookies for us. He just couldn't be a bystander. He couldn't remain a bystander. He heard what happened to the Jews. He had a brother who was a baker. Later, my father rewarded him thanked him after the war, and found out the story. This little bureaucrat, miserable little bureaucrat who could be bribed, was just sitting there. He could not be a bystander. He had to help the Jews. This is the only way. First, he only saved our morale. Later, I get to it. Later, he actually saved us from starvation. And so, as I said, in December 27, came for us to pick us up. This Hungarian Nazi and Hungarian. We were terrified, but my father was very calm, and we were only allowed to take a little suitcase. And we have seen this, we have seen from our window when they took other families. We knew that they're taking them to the railroad station, and it's a big factory. And when the train comes, they are shipped to a concentration camp. So we followed this, and these people were rude, this Hungarian Nazi and the soldier. They were very rude, go, go, go! And this at gunpoint, we were running in front of them. And it was late hour, there was big bombing that day. We were terrified, and we were going in front of them. We didn't know where they are taking us. I was absolutely, I just followed in terror. We went to a house, that is Boulevard 6, and I didn't know why we are stopping at that gate. It was closed, the gate, and we had to bang on it for a long time before it opened. But the only thing I knew, that on the side street of the same building, still in the same building, my father's offices were in that side street. That's the only way I knew the area. Finally, the door opens, and there is German soldiers, SS inside. We go along, suddenly my father is the one who is talking to the SS. He is discussing for a few minutes, he's talking to them in German, and then all of us, including the Hungarian Nazi and including the Hungarian soldier, we all go across the courtyard and go into the back doors of my father's offices. The Hungarian Nazi and the Hungarian soldier no longer holding the gun on us. They just came along. We get into my father opens the back door of his office, and we go in without removing his coat. My father takes a bottle of brandy off the shelf and takes out 3 glasses, pours 3 glasses in the brandy. Hungarian soldier takes a glass, the Hungarian Nazi takes a glass, my father takes a glass, and we hear with bewilderment 3 of them going, L'chaim. L'chaim is in Hebrew, means for life. They were toasted for life. These were 2 Jewish boys my father hired for us, who were brave enough to wear a Nazi uniform and the Nazi Hungarian soldiers uniform, and they brought us into this house. What is this house? And this is it annoys me that after all these years, it's still the only person who ever wrote that. Well, actually, that's not quite true. There is somebody also wrote about it. A doctor who lives in Great Neck, New York. But the book, there is a book we wrote. I am one of the few who ever wrote about this. At the very end of the war, the SS, at the instructions of Himmler, decided to save Kurt Becker, SS Lieutenant Colonel, decided to save some Jews just so for money and for a signature, so he can be saved. And he picked a building in Budapest, and just by luck, it is sheer luck that my father's office happened to be in that building. That is sheer luck. I mean, it's a miracle. And he saved 1,000 Jews. Supposedly, he asked $20,000 per family. I don't know how much is true. I don't have any idea whether my father had to pay less because we stayed in he stayed in his office, or he had to pay more because we had my 2 aunts with us also, not just the 3 of us. So there were more people. My father was much more a gentleman to ever discuss it. So I never knew, all I knew is that after the war we were very, very poor. And very poor. And so I assume that whatever money he had, he gave it to them. My father, whenever he had a little time, he disappeared and went into his office. We never knew why, since there was no more business. He didn't really own it. But he collected there 5 beds. He collected there food enough for 5 people for a long time. And he didn't know when or we need it, but he was thinking maybe someday we would need to hide there in his office. And this was a time when we did. After I think on New Year Eve, so just a few days later, we had to move down to the basement. And because the bombing was so bad, we moved down to the basement. Apartment houses have little nooks where they can keep perhaps extra furniture and so on. Here the businesses had a little nook that my father kept firewood, for his business. That's where the wood was stored. And so we were sitting, there was no chairs, we were sitting on a pile of wood day and night. There was no way of lying down. There was no way of cooking either, so that's when the cookies saved our life, because when came the last night of the war, by the way, there was a bomb shelter. The bombing was terrible. There was a bomb shelter there, and the bomb shelter was only for Gentiles. No Jews were allowed there. And it was understood, and even the SS respected that. I mean, they took the money of the Jews and allowed the Jews to hide there, but they had nothing to say about basically who goes into the shelter. The shelter was only for Gentiles, not for Christians. So the last night of the war, the Russians are coming already street by street, occupying and liberating us, and we expected that the Russians might come into this building with a little bit bigger force, because probably they suspect there are Germans there, so maybe they will attack that house with a little bit bigger force. So we sent a committee to the shelter, to the air raid shelter, and asked the Christians there if they would, just for this last night of the war, basically one night, would they allow the children, the Jewish children, into the shelter. The response came firmly and quickly: no Jews will enter our shelter. Last night of the war. Okay. So we stayed out, and I stayed with my parents, and suddenly, around 3 o'clock in the morning, a gigantic explosion, just exactly as we expected. The Russians come in and they threw in something, a gigantic explosion. The gas was filling the basement, and we thought we will die. I mean, it was just gas. We could not breathe. My mother sat down and put my head on her lap and said, "We're going to die. Just put your head here, and we're going to die now." Well, I put my head there, and then I waited and waited. You know, dying can get very boring. I don't know if you know it, but so I got bored and I looked up, and it was still the dirty basement where I was, the filthy basement, but the gas was kind of evaporated because the windows were broken and it went away. And we were alive, all of us. And then came the morning, and we went out to see what the explosion was about. Well, indeed the Russians, as expected, threw in a gigantic explosive through the gate, and it went up and exploded about 4 or 5 story high. Everything came down, the cement, the steel beams, the refrigerators, the furniture, everything came down on top of the shelter, the air raid shelter. Nobody in that air raid shelter remained alive. Everybody died there from all that weight falling on them. We just stood there very quietly. Nobody said anything. When we went back a few days later, we went back to our apartment. We could never go back to the original apartment that burned out. And so we waited for the family to return from the concentration camps. Nobody except one cousin of that large, healthy family, only one woman, one cousin returned from Auschwitz. Within months, she was arrested with committing no crime. Oh, she went back to her village. By that time, that village, that part of Hungary, Northeast Hungary, belonged to the Soviet Union. Within months, she was arrested and sentenced for 25 years Siberia. So right from Auschwitz, she went to a gulag, to the concentration camp in Siberia. Nothing, she was 21 years old. When Stalin died after 9 years, she got amnesty. That was even worse. She went back to her village, and she, in 1968, with the help of my family, she was able to actually arrange a fake marriage for her and so on. She came to visit her husband in Czechoslovakia. And 68 was a Czech revolution, and she came. She forgot to go back east with the Czechs. She went west to Vienna and eventually settled down in Cleveland. She spoke 6 languages. She was relatively successful. But I used to say that's when the saddest thing happened. You know, after Auschwitz, after Siberia, she became a Republican. But so she died in 1995, and she was a remarkable lady. And so she was the only one who returned from Auschwitz. And okay, I lived in Hungary till 1956. But by that time I had a degree, which here it was told, you know, somewhere between master's degree and PhD in clinical psychology. Came out here, 25 years worked as a software engineer, which in those days all the computer companies were full of ex-psychologists and so on, chemists, literary majors. There was no computer science. So I have 2 boys. I live with my second husband, who is a wonderful, wonderful man, and I live a very happy life. I work for 2 TV stations, 2 cable TV stations, as doing videos. One my own hometown and also Newton Television. I work for. Also, I enjoy it very, very much. Right now, video editing is my greatest passion. And any questions? Yes.
Some of the Jews were going into a concentration camp. Did they know there like
No, I would assume no. I always thought no, because there were no feedback. Those who went those who went into the gas chamber certainly never could write back and so on. No, I think they were told that they're going for a shower. They have to take off their clothes, take a shower, and so on. And then when they took the shower, when they took off their clothes and went into another chamber where there were fake shower heads there, then they were tested. So there was, now the people in Auschwitz knew that, there's a crematorium and smoke going up, his body is being burned, but they kept it. They didn't want panic, so they kept it, tried to keep it, the Germans, very smooth and so. Yes?
You said that two people managed to escape from Auschwitz. How did they manage that?
Read it, because I really can't. Amazing. For days they were buried there was some kind of a construction, a wooden construction, and they were, for days, were in this construction, waiting the opportunities. They were amazing. The book is by Rudolf Vrba, and it is I Cannot Forgive. That's the title. Sometimes I mix it up, Cannot Forget, but that's Cannot Forgive is the title. Rudolf Vrba, V-R-B-A, his last name. V like Victor, R like Richard, B like boy, A like alpha. Okay, Vrba. And it's a Slovakian name. Dr. Vrba died a few years ago. He was working as a biologist and researcher, became a prominent man in research. Anybody else? Yes.
You said that your cousin had the American name of Stephen, so was it common for people to have American names?
No, he was not Stephen. I'm sorry, I'm just using it here. His name was István, nickname Pista, and I just wanted to make it easier for you, so I'm calling him Stephen. No, it was not. Probably to appreciate freedom and probably, to appreciate this country. I don't forget, but I don't talk about it. I gladly come back and talk about that because that's worth talking about. I lived 12 years in communism, and that wasn't so much fun either. And while my parents were able to protect me basically from the Nazis, they were not able to protect me from the communists, and I was a capitalist child. My father was such a bad businessman. Why I was punished for being a capitalist child, I never understood it. It was my grandfather who made this business big. My father really, he was not interested in business. And he was an inventor and had many good inventions. But in any case, he was such a bad businessman, and I was constantly penalized because I was a capitalist child.
You said only one cousin survived. So if you have to go back because
Not only, so she's the only person in the family who came back from Auschwitz, but she's not the only cousin, a few more. We couldn't. Well, we heard that she went back to her own village, and by that time it was the Soviet Union, so we were in touch with her, and then within months she was shipped to Siberia, and we knew about her. When she came back in 9 years after Stalin died. So Stalin died in 53, in the spring of 53. So early 60s she came back to this village and was able to get in touch with us. And even we arranged a fake marriage for her. That's how she escaped. She went in Czechoslovakia to visit this fake husband, and then it happened to be 1968. But imagine, from 44 to 68, basically she was a prisoner of either the Nazis or the communists.
We have time for one more.
Anybody? Yes.
There was no urge to run.
Wait a moment.
When your mom asked you to put your head down and wait to die, there was no urge to run.
Where? Where did I run? It was a basement, we were stuck. The gates was, we didn't even know where would I run, because there were Russians fighting out on the street. Yeah, good question, nobody asked that yet. It's a good place to run, you just, you were stuck. Okay, so it was well, there's one more question, so that
After your experience in the Holocaust, did you have like any hard time coping with what happened, afterwards? Well, if the communists coming in, you mean for life, to hope in life? No, not much. I mean, true that the communism wasn't as bad, quite as bad as the Nazis were, but it was pretty bad. So we really got a double whammy, as they say, both the Nazis and the communists. Which I have now a lot of friends who survived the Holocaust in France and or Netherlands and so on. They didn't have this. Once the Allies came in, they were free. But those in the communist countries, they had two things. And it was, my father's business was taken away completely. So what the Germans didn't take, the communists took. I was not allowed to go to the college I wanted to go to because I was a capitalist child. I was constantly stepped on. Also, personally, I suffered more, certainly psychologically, but I suffered more from the communists than from the Nazis because my parents protected me from the Nazis. I said, oh, there's this thing.